Imagine a time before Switzerland existed, a time when the heart of the Alps was a patchwork of rugged mountain communities and ambitious feudal lords. This is the story of a battle that would echo through centuries, a clash that would forge a nation. This is the story of Morgarten. In the early 1300s, the valleys of Schwyz and Unterwalden were more than just remote mountain settlements. They controlled the lifeblood of European trade. The vital passes through the Alps, especially the Gotthard Pass. These communities, known as the Forest Cantons, treasured their unique status of imperial freedom. This meant they answered only to the Holy Roman Emperor, not to the local nobles who were constantly trying to expand their power. And no one was more ambitious than the House of Habsburg. From their strongholds in modern-day Austria, the Habsburgs saw the free mountain folk as a frustrating obstacle. They wanted control, they wanted to impose order, and most of all, they wanted the lucrative tolls from the trade routes. The tension was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. That spark came in 1314. A messy political fight for the imperial throne split the empire. Two men claimed the crown. Louis of Bavaria and the Habsburgs' own Frederick the Handsome. The Forest Cantons, fearing a Habsburg emperor would crush their freedom. Through their support behind Louis, this defiance set the stage for a direct confrontation. The local trigger was a dispute between the people of Schwyz and the Abbey of Johansidal, a monastery under Habsburg protection. The men of Schwyz, desperate for more pasture land, had been clearing forests on land the abbey claimed. When the abbot got the Pope to excommunicate the entire community of Schwyz, things turned violent. In early 1314, a band of men from Schwyz raided the monastery, taking monks hostage and plundering its supplies. For the Habsburgs, this was the perfect excuse. They branded the mountain folk as lawless rebels and prepared to make an example of them. Duke Leopold, the First of Austria, brother of the Habsburg claimant to the throne, assembled a fearsome army. Medieval chroniclers speak of 20,000 men, though modern historians think 2,000 to 3,000 is more realistic. But numbers weren't the whole story. This was the pinnacle of medieval military might. A corps of heavily armored knights on massive war horses, the chivalric elite of Europe. Leopold's plan was simple: march into the heart of the valleys and crush the peasant rebellion in a single, decisive blow. He saw this not as a war, but as a simple police action against a rabble of farmers. The men of the Forest Cantons knew they stood no chance in an open field. Their army, perhaps 4,000 strong, was a militia of herdsmen and farmers. They had no knights, no grand cavalry. What they had was something far more valuable: an intimate knowledge of their mountainous home. They decided not to meet the enemy, but to make the enemy come to them, on their own terms. They chose their ground with deadly precision. A narrow path, winding along the shore of Lake Ägeri, heading towards the village of Satal. On one side, the cold, deep waters of the lake. On the other, a steep, wooded slope rising sharply above the road. Legend says a warning was shot into their camp on an arrow, telling them to prepare at Morgarten. On the morning of November 15, 1315, Duke Leopold's army marched into the trap. To navigate the narrow passage, his impressive force had to stretch out into a thin column nearly 2 kilometers long. The knights, encased in their shining steel, were packed tightly together, their war horses struggling for footing. Their greatest strength, their heavy armor, and powerful mountswise, about to become their greatest weakness. Suddenly, the silent forest above them erupted. From the slopes, the Swiss defenders unleashed an avalanche of rocks and logs. Giant tree trunks crashed down into the packed column, smashing into men and horses. The front of the line was blocked, but the rear kept pushing forward, creating a horrific, chaotic bottleneck. Panic ripped through the Habsburg ranks. And then, the Swiss descended. They swarmed down from the hillside, not with swords and lances, but with a weapon that would become a Swiss icon, the halberd. This simple polearm, a combination of a spear, an axe, and a hook, was devastatingly effective. It was long enough to keep a knight at a distance, sharp enough to chop through armor, and had a hook to pull riders from their saddles. One chronicler wrote that it wasn't a battle, but a slaughter. The Swiss, fighting for their homes and their freedom, showed no regard for the chivalric tradition of taking prisoners for ransom. They hacked and stabbed, turning the narrow road into a killing ground. Trapped between the ambush from above and the lake below, the proud Habsburg knights had nowhere to go. Many were cut down where they stood. Others, driven by panic, plunged into the icy lake, where the weight of their own armor dragged them to the bottom. Duke Leopold himself barely escaped with his life. The news of the disaster at Morgarten stunned Europe. For the first time, a disciplined force of common foot soldiers, using terrain and clever tactics, had utterly destroyed an army of elite armored knights. This was the beginning of the end for the dominance of the cavalry on the medieval battlefield. Historians call it the start of the infantry revolution. The political impact was just as massive. Just weeks after the battle, the Forest Cantons renewed their alliance with the Pact of Brunnen, creating a stronger, more formal union. Their victory guaranteed their autonomy and inspired other communities. In the following decades, cities like Lucerne, Zurich, and Bernwood joined the alliance, laying the foundation for the old Swiss Confederacy. Today, Morgarten is remembered as the first great military triumph in Swiss history. It wasn't a victory of numbers or technology. It was a masterpiece of planning, timing, and using the landscape as a weapon. It proved that a united community, fighting for a common cause, could stand against the mightiest powers of the age. The silent mountains of the Alps had not just witnessed history, they had helped to shape it, protecting the birth of a nation that would endure for centuries. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, please like this video and subscribe for more stories from history. We'll see you next time.